Hi guys, we tend to think, and for the most part it's correct, but there is a tendency to believe that everyone who voted for Brexit was either a racist or a bigot, or somebody who thought that they would benefit from reduced regulations. Farage, for example, sold the line to the fishing communities that getting out of Europe would allow them to catch more fish, to avoid what he told them were silly regulations, and that the EU would not respond in any way because they needed British fishermen more than the fishermen needed the EU. But apart from those, along with taking back control, a caller to the Ben Kentish show provided another reason people voted for Brexit, which many now regret: Boris Johnson.
Yes.
What was it that swung you, Scott? What was it that you heard from him and others that won you over to the Leave campaign?
What he'd done for London. What he had done for London. I believe that he could do for the UK. This is nothing. I live in the north of Scotland. We don't have a racist view up here. So, yeah, your other presenters, James O'Brien and that way, I never ever considered the fact a brown person, a black person, a green person, a yellow, but whatever. I never ever took that into account. What I believe was going to be better for the United Kingdom. And remember, this is a United Kingdom. I'm a staunch United Kingdom person.
So it was the fact that it was Boris Johnson saying it more than what he actually said that convinced you, because you had faith in him as a person and as a leader.
Yes, I did.
And how do you feel about him now, Scott? I've got a bit of an indication from what you've said, but tell me.
Oh, I hang my head in shame. I believed him.
And would you like to have the opportunity to undo your vote and the Leave vote?
Yes, without a doubt, yes.
Why
tomorrow.
Today, you want it now, effectively. And millions of other people have changed their mind too. Why do you think our politicians are so reluctant to accept that and change their positions too?
It's one of these things. Once you've said it, do you back up on it and say, oh, I've made a mistake? There's very few politicians who'll turn around and say, oh, I made a mistake, can we go back? And that's what they need to do. That's what they need to do. And say, oh, what a mistake we made. What a mistake we made. Can we try again? What's the matter with that? What's the matter with being able to say we got it wrong?
It's completely correct, Scott. You're completely correct. But when it comes to politicians saying, I made a mistake, they're not going to do that. The only way to deal with politicians who refuse to make a mistake, who will refuse to apologize for making a mistake or admit making a mistake, is to vote them out. So there's no point waiting for people like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Mark Francois or John Redwood to come out and say, I was wrong about Brexit. You have to vote them out and vote in politicians who will say, yes, Brexit was a mistake. Politicians who will be honest about the situation. Now, to go back to the main point here, Boris Johnson, this man, Scott, in Scotland, he's I believe he's a union supporter. He's not a member of the SNP or a voter with the SNP. He believed in Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was the reason he voted for Brexit. Now, Boris Johnson, as Mayor of London, he was very popular. Many people, including James O'Brien, I believe, voted for Boris Johnson as Mayor of London. I think Johnson brought this sort of cult of personality with him when he ran for Mayor of London, and it certainly boosted his image when he eventually became a member of cabinet and eventually Prime Minister. But Boris Johnson as Mayor of London was a disaster. He cut, for example, public services like the fire brigade. And there seems to be a link, at least, I don't know if it's a direct link or an indirect link with what the Grenfell disaster, because of the cuts to the fire service that Boris Johnson presided over. He left the Transport for London with massive debts. So Boris Johnson was not, on the surface, He was very popular. He was very outgoing. He put London back on the map, if you want to put it like that. That can be argued. But looking at the detail of Boris Johnson's role as mayor, he was a disaster. But just looking at Boris Johnson as an individual, I really struggle to understand why people thought he was somebody to back. When he wrote articles, when he was a journalist, he lied. He was fired also because he was lying about information in articles. He was a horrible individual. He had written disgusting articles about members of society, gay people, foreigners, black and brown people. His record was terrible, and people still believed he was the right guy. He was somebody. It's not just I voted for Boris Johnson to get. I voted for Brexit because of Boris Johnson. Now, Scott is saying here he hangs his head in shame because of that. But it must be taken as a warning that we must look at these individuals critically. We must look at what they're presenting critically. Because the cult of personality is really strong. And you can apply that also to Nigel Farage. People believed Nigel Farage. He went to fishing communities. He knows nothing about fishing, or very little. But he was able to convince these people over the advice of experts. This is the crazy thing about Brexit, is on the one side you had a charismatic figure like Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage, telling people something. And on the other side you had experts, and the public ignored the experts and listened to the politician. That's extremely dangerous. Brexit has exposed some of that, but the cult of personality remains. Look at the Conservative Party at the moment. Many of the members of the party want Boris Johnson back in again, after all that has happened. The reason Boris Johnson is making so much money touring the United States and delivering speeches is because of that cult of personality. So the lies, the destruction of the UK, almost in a case literally with Brexit, is forgotten because Boris Johnson is charismatic. This is extremely dangerous and it needs to be challenged. But back to Scott, I think it's important that people come out and say that they were wrong and that they made a mistake. It shows courage, and we must respect that. But when it comes to the politicians who refuse to do that, the only way to deal with them is to vote them out of office. Because there's no point in keeping them there. They're not going to change their mind, or they're not going to admit, at least, that they made a mistake. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.